So over the last few days, I've been going over all of the combat gameplay non-stop in an attempt to get an understanding of how combat will work in Xenoblade 3. And I think I now have a pretty good idea of what every HUD element means, how the combat is going to work, and how interlinking will affect the gameplay. So make sure to watch to the end, even if you've already seen Enel's combat guide, because there's some things that he missed. Please keep in mind though that most of this video is mere speculation, and we won't get any true confirmation of how all of this works until the game comes out. But without further ado, let's jump right into the base combat for Xenoblade 3. Many of the mechanics from Xenoblade 2 though appear to be returning in this game. Auto attacks, for instance, seem to work near identically, as you don't appear to be able to attack whilst on the move, and landing these attacks refreshes your arts. The only difference from Xenoblade 2 appears to be a lack of the 3-hit system, although we haven't had anywhere near enough footage to confirm that for sure just yet. A really handy feature that they appear to have added though is an icon here that tells you when you are in auto attack range. As we can see from Noah in this clip, this icon only starts to appear once he gets close to the enemy, which is what leads me to think that this is the purpose that this icon serves, and this should prove helpful for ranged characters, where the maximum range isn't always clear. Arts also appear to work similarly to Xenoblade 2, and the much beloved art cancelling mechanic also appears to be returning. By activating an art at the end of your auto attack or previous art's animation, you can cancel it and start your next art instantly, providing you with a slight damage boost. Art cancelling also appears to increase your talent gauge more than using arts ordinarily. However, there appears to be a little bit more to filling talent gauges than just this, so we'll talk about them in a little bit. At the side of most arts, there are little symbols which appear to show what the art's effect is. Much of this information is shown through the text at the side anyway, but it could be handy to know and memorize these icons so that you can play without the text taking up as much of the screen. Unfortunately though, not every effect shows up here, such as there being no icon for sleep here, even though we already have seen the icon in game. Hopefully this is just one part of the game that remains unfinished in the current build and will have been added by release. Additionally, there is also an arrow present above the X art which shows us which side of the enemy you are facing and attacking. This will be invaluable in assisting us with our positioning when using arts which deal bonus damage on a certain side of the enemy. A new feature to Xenoblade 3's combat though is the fusion mechanic. You have probably noticed this prompt on screen a few times with the ZR fusion inside of it, as well as the art palette on the left side of the screen. These are the two crucial parts which make up the fusion art system. When both your art and the corresponding art are fully charged, a line will form between them, and you can utilize the effect of this additional art, which in this case we can see is knockback. Performing an art fusion is signalled with an orange spark that erupts out of the party member and can actually be seen a couple of times throughout the trailer. These fusion arts can also come from multiple classes at the same time. Ground Beat is an art from the Sword Fighter class and can be seen in multiple shots of the trailer, whereas Hidden Thorn is likely one of the Twin Ring / Zephyr classes arts. There also appears to be no limitation to which arts can fuse, as Uni's healing arts can have this offensive arts debuff effect. So there may be a few hundred different combinations that we can play around with. I imagine that these will also have a pretty large role in the gameplay, as the most right command within the tactics menu is focus on arts fusion, which presumably will have your AI companions saving their arts until they can perform an arts fusion. There is also only very little footage of these arts on the left actually being charged up. However, I managed to find this one clip in the Japanese trailer where the Sword Fighter art Ground Beat appears to be charged as the Sword Fighter class, which is currently on Senna, is auto attacking. Going frame by frame shows that the meter went up at roughly the same time that her attack hit, but this could have just been a coincidence of timing, so we'll need more gameplay to confirm if this is the case. One final minor thing to mention about the arts though is that their shape is reminiscent of which side of the fight they're from. If playing as a soldier from the Kiva's side, then they are circles on the right and squares on the left. side, and the opposite is true if they are from the Agnes side. Just a cool minor thing that I wanted to point out. Finally, the last two things to mention about the base combat are talent gauges returning and the dash mechanic. Starting with the former, we appear to have the ability to quickly reposition on the battlefield. This may have some impact on evading attacks, but this hasn't actually been demonstrated thus far, so for now, I believe this is just a movement tool. The other thing, of course, are talent arts, and these are an even bigger mystery. There are many inconsistencies amongst the trailer gameplay that leads me to believe that the requirements to fill each of them may be different. For instance, the Sword Fighter's talent art seems to randomly fill when the art Sword Strike is performed. In 2 out of 3 instances, the talent art is fully restored from nothing even when the bonus effect of attacking from the side is not utilized. But in the English version of the same clip, nothing happens or changes. They have even been shown to increase more depending on art cancelling whilst in the Ouroboros forms. So maybe it's due to the attack critting or some other unknown factor, but talent arts are back. So now, let's talk about chain attacks. They're returning again in Xenoblade 3, and once again, they are completely different to previous iterations. During chain attacks, you can select which party member you want to use and which art you want them to perform. After using a party member, they disappear, and you seem unable to use them once again. So we may only be able to perform a maximum of 7 moves in any one chain attack, or we may reset after using all 7 and have another rotation. Another new part of chain attacks is TP, standing for tactical points, not to be confused with tension points from Xenoblade X. Each party member is granted a certain value of TP, and using that party member adds that amount instantly to the count in the center. Additional bits of TP are also added as the art is performed, due to many different variables, such as having full HP, the attack not being blocked, and using the same class type in succession. This TP seems to then be used to complete the challenge, which can be seen in the top right of the screen, which will grant an additional bonus. I speculate that these challenges may be different and determined by who you initiate the chain attack with, giving us a tactical reason to choose a certain party member in certain situations. After this challenge is then completed, TP is likely used to increase the damage counter, as there was no change between Mio and the Noppon's attack, but an extra 100% has been added by the time that Noah is using his talent art. Overkilling also returns as a mechanic from Xenoblade 2, and it seems to work very similarly from that game. As can be seen in the Japanese trailer, you gain an EXP bonus depending on how much over damage you do in overkill, and this seems to rise pretty quickly, all things considered. Of course, to initiate a chain attack in the first place, we need to first fill up the meter. There appears to be a multitude of ways to do this, but the most consistent one that I spotted in the trailer was applying debuffs like Topple and Daze. There are probably many ways to increase this counter, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were identical to the previous iterations. Right then, now it's time to talk about the big thing. Ouroboros. When 2 of your party members interlink, they become an Ouroboros, and this form can be used in battle to increase their attack power. Whilst in this form, your arts are replaced and you no longer have a HP amount. Instead, you now have a heat meter which rises as you use arts and continue the battle. It appears to me that you may also increase your damage as your heat level increases, as damage values in certain clips seem to randomly rise. We have not seen what happens when this form reaches max heat level, but I would imagine that it ends the form and potentially has some other adverse effects as well. The effectiveness and power of your Ouroboros transformation is also likely affected by your interlink level. I'd speculate that the higher your level is, the longer it takes to reach maximum heat level, the amount of damage you deal out is increased, and maybe even how quickly your arts recharge. We don't have any footage showing how to level up the interlink level, so we don't so it's really unclear why this interlink levels up. Senna, who is of course the partner for lands when interlinking, does use a fusion art exactly one frame before lands, and so performing them in sync, but there's no way to truly know if this is how we level it up, as there just isn't enough information to go off of yet. My best guess would be that it is tension related, as this has been a feature in every other Xenoblade game, but there is nothing to show that it is here so far, so I'd guess that this was the cause. To activate interlink, it looks like you will simply need to press left on the D-pad, which will begin the interlink process, and I'm happy to report that I have also figured out what the bars filling up around this symbol mean, and trust me, you are not going to believe it. Are you ready? The icon that is filling up is another heat meter. If you look closely at any point in the trailer, you will see that both the heat meter and this icon fill up at practically the same rate, and I'm sure that there will be a few of you out there who are doubtful and suggest that whatever this bar is filling up just happens to rise at the same rate, in which case I would agree, it is possible until you see that this icon begins to flash red when getting hot, exactly like the warning heat. You also have the ability to cancel the transformation, which is likely used to allow the ability to cool down, and hence the purpose of a second way of measuring your heat level. I imagine that the Ouroboros form will simply cool down over time, and you can activate it whenever you like, which, considering that they seem to be immortal in this form, means that you should be able to absorb powerful attacks and take no damage. You may also be able to use Ouroboroses in chain attacks, as this icon does not disappear from the HUD and isn't greyed out, suggesting that it is possible. But as far as I can tell, that is all there is to the Ouroboros forms, which is nice to know that they at least won't be super complicated to get your head around. That said, there are a few other combat related things that I wanted to bring up to round out this video. Daze, for instance, is returning from Xenoblade 1, but it isn't going to work exactly the same. In Xenoblade 1, Daze stacked on top of Topple and paused its timer, whereas in this game, it completely replaces it, like how these effects worked in Xenoblade 2 instead. We can see in this clip, for instance, that the Ansel simply gets back up as Daze ends, instead of the Topple debuff returning. Another returning feature is that enemies will become enraged once again. In this clip, this Ardon's portrait is on fire, showing that he has the enraged status, but in the Japanese trailer, this process has not happened yet, but we can see a little flame on his health bar. This is showing the effect at which this effect will activate, and it should alleviate any annoyances when enemies do this randomly out of the blue. I mentioned this earlier, but we got to see the tactics menu opened in the Japanese version for just a moment, and this includes a few extra cool details. The options that we can choose translate to Combo Free, which is the normal AI setting, Concentrated Attack, which makes all of the party members focus on the enemy you are currently targeting, and Gather, which will bring all of your party members to your location. Another thing of note, however, is the existence of this L and R prompt. Via comparing these to the character portraits, I deduced that these say Mio and Senna. Now, credit where credit is due, I only discovered this through Enel's combat guide, but whereas he thought that it would allow you to swap classes with that particular party member, I believe this is a way of switching between party members mid-combat. Speaking of classes, the Defender class seems to have a unique effect. These blue rings can be seen multiple times throughout the trailer, and whenever an ally is within the area of one of these rings, they get this shield icon next to their health bar. I believe this is going to be a form of damage reduction that helps protect allies when grouping up too close to the tank, possibly a result from their testing of using 7 party members at once. These are different, however, to the field effects, which is also a new introduction to the series. We can see from Uni that she has 2 arts which are field skills, which creates this area around them which grants a certain buff. Tyon in a few clips can be seen applying this in the form of an evasion up buff, and all field buffs appear to use the same arrow icon and appear in 3 locations around the screen. On top of that, there are a couple of other things on screen that you should be looking out for. Number 1 are these arrows. These appear to be a symbol showing you when an ally has taken the aggro, as can be seen here as the Kivas mech turns towards Senna, but you may also see a blue version of this arrow every now and then as well. I believe this is the effect target lock, which will basically act like a taunt in this game, forcing the enemy to attack that party member. Secondly is the colour of the text that appears over the monster. Every different colour means something else, with the whitish text being your damage, blue text being your allies' damage, red text being damage onto your party members, and orange text being damage over time effects, which in this case appears to be bleed. There is also a small purple text that appears a lot, which in previous games was spike damage. However, there are some inconsistencies with how this text appears, so I'm not exactly sure how spikes work in this game. And that basically sums up everything I found about combat in the recent trailer. And of course, go watch Enel's video if you want to know his thoughts on the combat as well. Anyways, I appreciate you watching and hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've learnt something new, I'd appreciate it if you would click that subscribe button and help me take another step towards my goal of 10k subs. But with that said, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.